For most Americans, the Persian Gulf War is history, but not for Walter Pietsch. This Long Island peace activist filed a class action suit against President George Bush 2 days before Operation Desert Storm began. This Friday, oral arguments will be heard in the U.S. Court of Appeals. Pietsch says America's war against Iraq was illegal.
When I am made an accessory to murder, when my good friend Kathy Boylan from Long Island here is in a peace camp on the border of Iraq and going to die in 2 days, I'm going to stop that damn war.
Walter Pietsch joins us on the 21 edition. Mr. Pietsch, this damn war, as you call it, has ended. Your friend Kathy Boylan, the peace activist, returned safely from the desert. Don't you feel kind of silly going to court on Friday against the President of the United States?
Not at all. Not at all. If you have followed the course of this war that has now taken anywhere from 100 to 200,000 Iraqi lives, has left burning 500 or more oil wells in Kuwait, with oil throughout the Persian Gulf, the American taxpayer, as usual, is going to be paying the bill, as well as mankind, for many, many years to come.
Did George Bush set those fires? I thought Saddam Hussein set the fires.
Would he have set them if George Bush didn't murder 100,000 of his people?
Who knows?
Who knows? Certainly we could have tried not murdering them as a beginning.
All's fair in war, though.
Yeah, but we created the war. So
why do you say that? Didn't President Bush and his staff try and negotiate with Saddam Hussein, try and stave this war? Wasn't, in fact, the Iraqi leader bound and determined to go to war anyway?
Isn't that strange? That's the very thing I said in my lawsuit. I stated when Congress adopted the resolution on January the 12th, that resolution it adopted required Mr. Bush to use all diplomatic and peaceful initiatives before going to war. The government in defense could not state a single instance of his using any initiative whatsoever, and I think most of us know he made no initiative.
What about those last-minute negotiations, last-hour negotiations? The UN deadline was January 15th.
That's correct.
And everybody at the UN Security Council said, Mr. Saddam Hussein, if you withdraw your troops from Kuwait, by this deadline, no force will be used. Wasn't that a negotiation?
No, it was not. It was an ultimatum. That's not negotiation. France and Yemen had peace proposals on the table, and Mr. Bush told them if they did put them to a vote at the UN Security Council, the United States would veto them. So Mr. Bush himself violated the letter and intent of the congressional resolution. But that's not really where this lawsuit is at. That's an issue on the merits which we're hoping to get to.
Okay, what is the lawsuit about?
Okay. Basically, the lawsuit is saying we take no issue with the fact Saddam Hussein is not a nice guy. George Bush loved him for years. Mr. Reagan loved him for years. They gave him arms. They supported him while he killed his own people and other people.
Well, wait a minute. Love is a very emotional word. What you're talking about is the fact that they chose Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war because they figured it was the lesser of two evils. Is that love?
Well, you don't have to give guns to kill people to people who are murdering people. That's not very nice. There's no need to do that. Okay?
Continue.
You can stay out of it. All right. In any event, come August of 1990, when Mr. Hussein invaded Iraq, Kuwait, Mr. Bush then put in place the embargo, put our troops in a defensive posture in Saudi Arabia. Up to that point, no argument.
All right.
However, in November 1990, Mr. Bush, on his own initiative, with no resolution from Congress, went to the United Nations and demanded a resolution authorizing the use of force by January 15th. From that date, in November 1990, until 1 week before the war began, Mr. Bush said, I don't need Congress support to go to war. I'm Commander-in-Chief. Now, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, says Congress alone shall declare war.
Congress did declare war, in effect. They took a very emotional vote. It was very close, but in fact they said yes. If Saddam Hussein does not withdraw his troops by January 15th, force could be used. Isn't that Congress making the decision?
That's right, they were. With a gun to the head at the 11th hour, with the troops in place, with the guns in place, with the troops reassigned from the U.S. and Europe to the borders. The Constitution says Congress shall decide when we go to war. You don't go to Congress at the 11th hour and tell them either you go to war or you leave our troops unprotected, and I'm going to go to war anyway. And that's what Bush said. And meanwhile, we're still on the merits, which is fine. I'd love to get to the merits. The issue in this case on Friday is that the government knows that on the merits, they probably did violate the Constitution, so they're trying to stop this suit on a procedural grounds. The grounds they're using is lack of standing. They're saying I and the other plaintiffs have not suffered, and therefore we can't bring this suit.
Well, have you suffered?
I certainly have.
In what way?
Here is one proof. This here is a bottle of cortisone tablets, which is a heart medication. Never took them before in my life. February 12th of this year, at the height of the war, I wound up in the coronary care unit at South Nassau Community Hospital with coronary insufficiency. I never had a heart condition. And so now I'm on heart medication. I didn't suffer. At the time of the Vietnam War, which was my first lawsuit against illegal wars, I began having hyperventilation attacks after I was thrown in jail and I was the plaintiff in the suit. 3 weeks later, for the first time in my life, I began to suffer hyperventilation. Many people who are law-abiding and go to jail have kind of a traumatic effect. And when you're being made an accessory to murder against your will in an illegal war, which is my basis for standing, this causes me profound emotional damage. And I compare it to William Westmoreland, General Westmoreland's suit, where he was given standing to sue CBS for being called a liar. Now, being made an accessory to murder, in my opinion, is a far greater damage than being called a liar.
And you have doctor's testimony saying, yes, Mr. Pietsch did not have a medical problem until the war in Iraq began, and now he takes heart pills.
I don't even need that. The judge himself said, we do not doubt the truth of the plaintiff's allegations, meaning the judge agrees, I'm telling the truth. What he did in his decision, he struck from the record my argument for standing. He said he lacks standing as a citizen and taxpayer. I never alleged that. 21 times in oral argument, I stated profound emotional damage, and I traced my history of this damage. He struck it from the record because he knows that he would have to allow it to be heard on the merits otherwise. And by the way, the government has another basis it uses to deny a hearing of these suits called non-justiciable political question. If a GI is about to go to war and die, that one person might get standing to sue. Then they tell him, we can't hear it because it's something only the executive and the Congress can get involved with. So they use these two prongs to block a hearing on the merits. I call these two prongs two venomous fangs embedded in the jugular of the American people's right to be heard on the most fundamental issue of all, the right of the government to take human life. And I say when they use this and the courts agree, the courts are amending our Constitution by judicial fiat, which is a total violation of law.
It's very poetic, but you're not a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer, so let's move on. You're a member of ARISE.
That's correct.
Which is Americans Removing Injustice, Suppression, and Exploitation. As you mentioned, you went to court, U.S. Supreme Court?
Yes.
Against the war in Vietnam?
Yes.
You lost. You lost?
Well,
you lost.
It was never heard on the merits. When you say I lost, it was never heard.
All right. In 1986, you sued against the war in Nicaragua.
That's correct.
Outcome?
Outcome was it was never heard on the merits.
Again, you lost. Why?
When you say I lost, what do you mean I lost?
Did you get it? Did you get a hearing? It was dismissed.
It
was dismissed. It was not even considered. I don't consider that a victory.
Okay. Do you know that every lawsuit against all of these wars was never heard by the U.S. Supreme Court? Never once. In that court, under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution. Meanwhile, we've got plowshares activists and others in jail across our country for opposing these illegal wars. And I submit these people are the patriots, and the traitors are the courts and the government who are colluding and denying the American people their right to be heard on the merits when the government commits a crime. And under Nuremberg, that is the requirement. The people must force their government to obey the law. In this case, we have a criminal government and no recourse under law. And damn it, on Friday, I'm going to make sure we do have that recourse.
Well, you anticipated my next question.
Yes.
Some people would say, you are not patriotic, Walter Pietsch. What business do you have? Did you ever serve in a war, they want to know.
Okay. At age 18, I went in the U.S. Army. I served in the infantry in Korea. And in fact, I wrote an essay on freedom that the U.S. Army published in its A-frame news in Busan, Korea. I love my country, and I am determined to make it what it should be and not let it go around murdering people all over the world. That's not what the United States should be about.
We were scheduled to have a couple of Gulf returnees here tonight, and unfortunately they had a mishap with their car. We're going to have them on when they get back from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. But what would you have said to these two fresh-faced kids sitting across the table from you? They served in the Gulf. They think they're patriotic. How would you have faced them?
How would I face them? I have no problem at all. I tell them they were lied to by Mr. Bush. The argument is all about oil and power, and Mr. Bush's son getting power over an oil well in the Gulf now that they're setting up, now that the war is over. That's what it's about. It's about money and oil and power. We support dictators all over the world as long as it's in our interest. That has nothing to do with freedom. Certainly Kuwait was never a democracy, nor is Saudi Arabia. What are we supporting?
Walter Pietsch, you're an interesting man. Thank you for being our guest tonight on the 21 edition.